For centuries, the galaxy had spun its stories and histories, many of which were filled with strange and unimaginable creatures. Some of these tales were true, others were nothing more than fables passed down through generations. Yet there was one story that no one took seriously, a story of a species called humans. The legends told of a powerful race that once ruled the stars, a species that had created vast empires, built ships that could travel faster than light, and had mastered technologies that seemed impossible. But for reasons unknown, humans vanished. Some said they were wiped out by a terrible war, others claimed they had simply disappeared into the farthest reaches of the universe, leaving behind only whispers of their existence. Over time, the galaxy's races began to forget. Earth, the home planet of humans, became nothing more than a name in old archives, a forgotten world on maps, and a distant memory. No one truly believed in the humans anymore. They were treated as myths, like the stories of ancient dragons or great beasts that roamed the wilds of long-lost worlds. The idea that humans had ever existed seemed laughable to most. But not everyone had forgotten. There were a few who still remembered the stories, clinging to the hope that one day the humans would return. These were the historians and archaeologists who spent their lives searching for the truth, digging through ancient ruins and scouring the depths of space for any trace of the lost species. One such historian, a young researcher named Lyra, had dedicated her life to studying the myths of Earth and its people. She wasn't like the others who simply dismissed the legends as fairy tales. She believed there was more to the story. Lyra spent years collecting every scrap of information she could find: old recordings, fragmented transmissions, and stories from various alien races who had once encountered humans. There were small details that didn't make sense, pieces of the puzzle that seemed to fit together perfectly when viewed from the right angle. The other members of the Galactic Council, however, laughed at her ideas. Humans? Really? They would say. They are nothing more than the stuff of children's bedtime stories. Why waste time on a species that no longer exists? But Lyra wasn't deterred. She believed that the myths of the humans were based on truth. And if she was right, the galaxy would soon face something far greater than anyone could imagine. Then one day, something changed. A strange signal appeared at the outer edge of known space. It wasn't a natural phenomenon, nor was it an accident. It was deliberate, and it was unmistakable. The signal was coming from Earth. Lyra was the first to notice the anomaly. At first, she thought it was just a glitch, something easily explainable. But the signal grew stronger, more distinct, over time. It wasn't just a simple transmission. It was a complex pattern, as though someone was trying to communicate. The message was weak, faint, but unmistakable. The signal was too precise, too intentional to be ignored. She brought her findings to the council, but once again they laughed. They dismissed it as a mistake or an old piece of equipment malfunctioning. It's just interference, they said. A relic from the past. There's no way humans are still out there. But Lyra couldn't let go of the feeling that something was wrong. She was convinced that the signal was real, that it was humanity trying to reach out to the galaxy once again. The humans weren't just a myth. They were alive, and they had been hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to return. Her obsession with the signal grew stronger every day. Lyra pored over the data, searching for any clue that could confirm her theory. And then, as if by fate, a breakthrough came. She noticed something strange in the pattern of the signal, a series of mathematical coordinates hidden within the code. It was a location, and when she checked, it led her directly to the last known position of Earth, deep within a part of the galaxy that was still unexplored by modern ships. Her heart raced. This was it. The humans were real, and they were somewhere out there, waiting to be found. Lyra immediately called for an emergency meeting of the council. This time, she wouldn't take no for an answer. She needed to show them the truth. The fate of the galaxy depended on it. When she presented the evidence, the council was divided. Some members insisted that it was just a coincidence, while others were hesitant to even entertain the possibility of humans still existing. But one thing was certain: No one could deny that the signal was coming from the location of Earth. And that could only mean one thing. The humans were alive, and they had returned. As the news spread across the galaxy, it created a wave of mixed emotions. Some were thrilled at the idea of meeting the lost race, while others were fearful of what it might mean. What if the humans came back with anger in their hearts? What if they were seeking revenge for the long years of neglect and forgotten history? The signal continued growing stronger with each passing day. It was a call to the galaxy, an invitation to explore the unknown and rediscover the lost species of Earth. But there was a growing sense of dread that hung over the galaxy, as if something far more dangerous was about to unfold. Lyra knew that she was on the verge of uncovering something that would change everything. The myths of a forgotten species were about to become a reality, and nothing would ever be the same again. The galaxy buzzed with tension and curiosity. After years of dismissing the idea of humans as mere legends, the signal coming from Earth could no longer be ignored. It was impossible to deny something was out there, something powerful, and it was connected to the long-forgotten species known as humanity. As Lyra continued to monitor the signal, she knew that the time to act had arrived. She petitioned the Galactic Council once more, urging them to send an expedition to Earth's last known location. The council members hesitated. Fear and skepticism still clung to their hearts, but the signal was growing louder, stronger, almost as if it was calling out for someone to answer. Finally, after weeks of debate, a small team of explorers was chosen. They would travel to the edge of known space, to the coordinates that Lyra had uncovered, and investigate the source of the mysterious signal. The team was a mix of specialists, pilots, scientists, engineers, and military officers. All of them were well-trained, but none of them were prepared for what awaited them. The journey to Earth took several days, and as they approached the coordinates, a sense of unease filled the air. The crew exchanged nervous glances, wondering what they would find. Could humanity truly have survived? If they had, what would they be like now? Were they still the same species, or had they evolved into something far beyond the galaxy's understanding? The ship's sensors were on high alert as they crossed the boundary of the unexplored region. Nothing about the journey seemed normal. There was an eerie silence that filled the void around them, broken only by the hum of the ship's engines. No other ships, no signs of any activity, just the vast emptiness of space. And then, out of nowhere, it appeared. A dark shape in the distance. A massive structure, unlike anything the crew had ever seen. It was not a planet, nor was it a space station. It was something else entirely. Towering, sleek, and imposing, the structure seemed to float in the void, as if it were waiting for them. The crew was speechless as they gazed out the windows, their faces illuminated by the eerie glow of the structure. It was unmistakably human-made, but the design was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. There were no signs of age or decay. The structure seemed perfectly preserved, as if it had been waiting and hiding for centuries. "Is this Earth?" one of the officers asked, his voice trembling. Lyra nodded, her heart racing. "This is it. This is where they've been." The crew continued their approach, unsure of what to expect. They tried to hail the structure, sending out numerous signals, but there was no response. The structure remained silent, watching them from the darkness. The closer they got, the more unnerving it became. It felt as though they were intruding on something that had been untouched for far too long. As they drew near, another sight caught their attention. Small ships, sleek, fast, and powerful, began to emerge from the structure. They moved with precision, like silent predators, circling the explorer's ship. There was no communication, just the quiet hum of the ships as they glided through space. The ships were undeniably human in design, but they were far more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Their engines glowed with a cold, steady light, and their surfaces reflected the stars around them with eerie beauty. One of the ships approached the explorer's vessel, hovering just a few hundred meters away. The crew watched in awe, their eyes wide with both fear and fascination. This wasn't just a group of survivors. This was something far more dangerous, something that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Should we engage with them? The pilot asked, her voice shaky. Lyra shook her head. No, we wait. They've been hiding for too long. They will come to us when they're ready. The minutes stretched on in tense silence, the crew unsure of what to do next. It was clear that the humans weren't interested in communication, at least not yet. The small fleet of ships hovered nearby, their presence a stark reminder of the forgotten species' power. The explorers couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, judged. Suddenly, a transmission came through. The voice on the other end was clear, calm, and yet chilling. We have been waiting, the voice said. You have come to find us. Now you will know the truth. The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving the crew in stunned silence. What did that mean? What truth was the human voice speaking of? Was this an invitation or a warning? Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. The humans weren't just hiding. They were waiting for something. They had known that one day, someone would come to find them. And now that the galaxy was discovering them, they had made their presence known. The explorers knew they had crossed a line, that this encounter would change everything. The silence that followed was deafening, and the crew could only wait to see what would happen next. And as they waited, the first of the human ships moved forward, its sleek form gliding effortlessly toward the explorer's vessel. There was no turning back now. The silence that had hung heavy over the crew was finally broken. The human ship, sleek and silent, moved closer to the explorer's vessel. It was a powerful craft, far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Its design was both alien and familiar, perfectly engineered, with smooth lines that reflected the stars. Its black surface seemed to absorb the light around it, giving it an almost eerie quality. The explorers held their breath, unsure of what would happen next. The ship didn't open fire, didn't try to communicate further. It simply hovered there, looming in the vastness of space like a silent predator waiting for the right moment to strike. It was as if the humans were watching, studying the explorers, waiting for the right time to reveal themselves fully. Lyra was the first to speak. What do you think they want? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, replied the pilot, his eyes glued to the control panel. But I don't think they're here to play games. The tension was palpable. The explorers had expected contact, but not like this. They had expected a greeting, an explanation, even some form of communication. But what they got was silence, an eerie, unsettling silence that made them feel like intruders in a place they had no right to be. Then, without warning, the human ship powered up. The engines hummed with quiet intensity, and the small fleet of ships that had been circling the explorer's vessel began to move. Slowly at first, they'd formed a perfect formation, their movements synchronized, as though they were part of a larger, well-coordinated plan. Lyra's heart raced. She couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread. These weren't just survivors hiding in the shadows. These were humans, alive, and now clearly in control of their own destiny. Whatever they had been doing all these years, it had prepared them for this moment. Do we engage? One of the officers asked, his voice tinged with fear. Lyra hesitated. No, she said firmly. We stay calm. We wait for them to speak. They've been watching us long enough. Now it's time for us to listen. As the human ships continued their slow approach, the crew of the explorer's vessel remained frozen, watching in awe and fear. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the moment when humanity would reveal itself to the galaxy once again. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the lead human ship made its move. It floated forward, positioning itself directly in front of the explorer's ship. The engines powered down and all was still. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then the voice came again, cutting through the stillness like a knife. We are the remnants of Earth, and we have returned. The words echoed through the comm system, their weight heavy with meaning. The voice was cold, emotionless, yet carried an unmistakable sense of authority. Whoever spoke, they weren't just survivors. They were leaders. "We have been waiting for this moment," the voice continued. "For centuries we have stayed hidden, watching as the galaxy forgot us. But no more. The time has come for humanity to reclaim its rightful place." The explorers exchanged uneasy glances. What did this mean? What did humanity want? The human voice was unyielding. "You may have forgotten us, but we have not forgotten you. We are no longer the weak, scattered species you once thought us to be. We are stronger than you can imagine." Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. She had suspected that the humans weren't just survivors. They were something much more dangerous, something far beyond the understanding of the galaxy's other species. But hearing it from their own mouths, hearing the cold confidence in their tone, sent a shiver through her body. "We offer you a choice," the voice continued. "Join us, and together we will reshape the galaxy. Or stand against us and face the consequences." The transmission ended as abruptly as it had started, leaving the crew in stunned silence. No one spoke for a long moment. The enormity of what had just happened was too much to fully process. Humanity wasn't just alive, they were returning with a purpose, and that purpose was clear. They wanted to take control. Lyra felt her heart race. This was it, the moment the galaxy had been dreading. The humans weren't here to be peaceful allies. They were here to reclaim their dominance, to remind the galaxy of their lost power. "What do we do now?" the pilot asked, his voice shaking. Lyra took a deep breath. "We have no choice. We must inform the Council immediately. The humans are not here to make peace. They've come to dominate." As she said those words, Lyra couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The humans had returned, not as a broken, defeated species, but as something far more powerful. They had spent centuries preparing for this moment, and now that they were back, they were not going to be ignored. The explorer's ship began to turn back, leaving the human ships behind. The return to the galactic core was filled with questions and fear. What would the Council do? Would they accept humanity's offer, or would they resist, starting a war that could tear the galaxy apart? Lyra couldn't help but wonder. What had humanity become during all these years? And were the galaxy's races ready to face the consequences of underestimating them for so long? The explorer's journey back to the galactic core was filled with a palpable tension. The transmission from the humans echoed in their minds, and every member of the crew struggled to understand the implications of what they had just witnessed. Humanity was no longer the mythical species of old, long since forgotten by most of the galaxy's races. No, the humans had returned, and they were far more powerful than anyone could have imagined. When the explorer's ship finally arrived at the Council station, the atmosphere was heavy. The Council chamber was filled with representatives from every corner of the galaxy, each one of them powerful in their own right, yet now all united in a single, overwhelming sense of fear. The chamber buzzed with heated debates, each member shouting over the other in a panic-stricken frenzy. The Council had always been united in their belief that humanity was a myth, a story told to entertain the children of far-off worlds. Now their beliefs had been shattered in an instant. "We cannot just sit here and let them take over," said one of the military representatives, his voice shaking with fear. "They've returned and they've made it clear. They want to dominate. What if they decide to wipe us all out?" "There's no evidence they intend to do that," countered a diplomat, trying to keep the peace. "They've offered us a choice, join them or resist. But we can't make any decisions until we understand what they truly want." Lyra stood quietly at the back of the room, watching the chaos unfold. She had known the moment she saw those human ships that the galaxy was on the brink of something much bigger. She had seen the fear in the explorers' eyes, the awe in their expressions. Humanity had returned with a purpose, and it was clear that the galaxy had underestimated them for far too long. The message was clear. Lyra finally spoke up, her voice cutting through the noise. "The humans are not here to beg for our forgiveness or seek peace. They've come to reclaim what was once theirs." The room fell silent. Every pair of eyes turned toward Lyra. She had been one of the few to believe in the legends of humanity, and now her predictions were coming true. The weight of her words settled on the Council like a heavy cloak. They are not the weak, scattered species they were, Lyra continued. They've spent centuries preparing. Their technology, their ships, they're beyond anything we've seen before. They are stronger than we ever imagined. So what are you suggesting? Asked the head of the council, an elder from a race known for their wisdom. His voice was calm, but his eyes were filled with concern. That we just accept their demands? That we join them without knowing what they truly plan? No, Lyra said firmly. But we can't ignore them either. The humans will not be stopped. If we resist, there will be consequences. They've already made it clear they have the power to crush us. A murmur rippled through the council. Some nodded in agreement, while others looked away, unsure of what to do. The fear was palpable, spreading quickly through the chamber like wildfire. The galaxy had always been a place of diplomacy, of delicate balances and negotiations, but now the stakes had changed. What are they really after? One of the diplomats asked, her voice trembling. Why would they want to rule over us? What do they want from the galaxy? Lyra paused for a moment, her mind racing. I don't know, she admitted, but I do know that they have been waiting for this moment. They want something. And it's not just power. They want their place in the galaxy. They want to remind us of who they were, of what they once had. Another representative stood up, his eyes narrowed. And what if we don't join them? What if we refuse? They will destroy us, Lyra said quietly, but firmly. They're not asking for our allegiance, they're demanding it. And if we don't give it, we'll be treated like any other enemy. A sense of unease spread through the room. The council members exchanged uneasy glances, but none of them spoke. They were trapped in a dilemma. A powerful, long-forgotten species had returned to claim their place in the galaxy, and the galaxy's leaders had no idea how to respond. I've been in contact with the explorers, Lyra added, her tone growing more serious. The humans have already begun to gather their ships. More are coming. And they won't stop until they get what they want. The head of the council stood up slowly, his expression grave. We cannot allow this to happen. We cannot let them destroy everything we've built. But what choice do we have? Another council member whispered, her voice barely audible. They've already shown us their power. We can't fight them. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes scanning the room. I don't have an answer for you. But I do know one thing. We must act quickly. If we don't, the humans will overrun us, and it will be too late. The council was divided. Some argued that humanity must be opposed at all costs. Others believed that the best course of action was to negotiate, to try and find some way to live alongside them. But no one could agree on the next step. Fear and uncertainty clouded every decision. The discussions continued late into the night, but no solutions were found. In the end, the council was no closer to understanding the true intentions of the humans. What Lyra had feared most was coming true. The galaxy was unprepared for what humanity's return meant. The humans had returned not just as survivors, but as conquerors, and the galaxy had no idea what the consequences of that would be. The tension in the council chamber had not abated. If anything, it had only grown worse since the initial transmission from the humans. The debates had become increasingly heated, and the divisions between those who wanted to resist and those who wanted to negotiate were growing deeper. Lyra had spent hours pacing the halls of the council station, trying to make sense of what was happening. She had always known that humanity was special, but even she hadn't anticipated the overwhelming power they seemed to possess now. Their technology, their ships, their resolve, it was all beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. She had witnessed their power firsthand, and now the rest of the galaxy was beginning to understand just how dangerous it was. But still, there was no consensus. The council couldn't agree on a plan of action. Some argued that they should try to communicate with the humans, attempt to find a diplomatic solution. Others, especially the military representatives, believed that war was inevitable. And then there were those like Lyra, who knew that the humans weren't asking for permission. They were taking back what was once theirs. We can't keep pretending we have a choice, Lyra muttered to herself as she stared out of the large observation window. The station floated just outside the galactic core, a beacon of peace and unity. But now it felt more like a fragile shell, waiting to be cracked open by the storm that was approaching. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime. A message. Lyra immediately walked over to her terminal and opened the incoming transmission. It was from one of the explorers who had made contact with the humans. Her heart skipped a beat as she saw the name on the screen. "This is Captain Dorian of the Astral Flame. We've encountered a new fleet, larger than we could have imagined. They're on the move." Lyra's stomach tightened. It was happening. Humanity wasn't waiting any longer. They were advancing. She quickly accepted the transmission. The face of Captain Dorian appeared on the screen, his expression grim. "Lyra, you need to understand something. The humans aren't just here for us. They've sent fleets to every major sector in the galaxy. They've already made contact with several other races, and they are demanding that we either join them or face annihilation." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The scale of the situation was beginning to become clear. This wasn't just about Earth. Humanity's reach, their influence, had expanded far beyond what anyone had expected. "Do you have any idea what they're planning?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Captain Dorian shook his head. "No, but whatever it is, it's bigger than anything we've seen before. They've offered nothing but ultimatums, and they're not negotiating." Lyra's mind raced. If humanity had indeed spread out across the galaxy, establishing themselves as a power not to be trifled with, it would be impossible to ignore them now. The galaxy's balance of power had been forever altered, and there was no going back. "What should we do?" Lyra asked, feeling a sense of helplessness creeping in. Captain Dorian looked away for a moment, as if struggling to find the right words. When he spoke again, his voice was low, filled with the weight of what was to come. "We don't have a choice anymore. We need to unite. The galaxy has to come together, or we will fall one by one." Lyra nodded slowly, her heart heavy with the burden of the decision ahead. The Council had to act, and fast. If they didn't, humanity would steamroll through the galaxy, and the races that had once held power would be nothing more than remnants of a forgotten time. As Lyra turned to leave her office, her mind was consumed with one thought. Could they really stand against humanity? Could the galaxy unite in time to stop a force that had been waiting for centuries to rise again? The next day, the Council was called to a special session. The urgency in the message was clear. Humanity was on the move, and the time for debating was over. It was now a matter of survival. Lyra entered the council chamber, her heart heavy. Representatives from every race were present, their faces filled with dread. The once quiet chamber now hummed with a low murmur of voices, each one trying to figure out what their next move would be. The head of the council, an elder of the powerful Zora species, stood and raised a hand to quiet the room. "We've all heard the message from Lyra and Captain Dorian. Humanity's fleets are not just coming. They are already here in multiple sectors, demanding our submission. The question before us now is simple. Do we resist or do we surrender?" The room fell silent, each member deep in thought. The weight of the decision hung heavily in the air. The representative from the Rin, a race known for their sharp intellect and ability to strategize, stood up. "We must resist," he said firmly. "If we surrender now, we will lose everything. We cannot allow one species to rule over us all." Another representative, a towering creature from the Harkna, shook his head. "But if we resist, we will be crushed. The humans have shown us their power. There is no way we can match them in strength." The council broke into heated debate once more, but this time there was no solution. No matter how they tried to reason with each other, the truth was becoming clear. The humans had returned, and they had brought the galaxy to its knees. Lyra stood at the back of the room, watching the chaos unfold. She knew that the council would eventually have to make a decision, but no matter what they chose, there would be no easy way out. The calm before the storm had ended. The galaxy was about to find out just how far humanity was willing to go to reclaim their place in the stars. The galaxy had never been so divided. The news of humanity's return spread like wildfire through the stars, and every species, every race, found themselves grappling with a choice they never thought they would have to face. The once harmonious alliances were now fractured. Diplomats, generals, and civilians alike were forced to confront the stark reality. Either bend the knee to humanity or fight a battle they had no hope of winning. In the heart of the Galactic Council, the tension had reached a boiling point. Debate raged on with no resolution in sight. Lyra watched helplessly as the council argued the same question, looping endlessly with no answers. Resistance is futile, the Zora elder spoke, his voice calm yet filled with a growing weariness. The humans have the firepower to wipe out entire fleets in an instant. We cannot afford a war. There are no winners here. A sharp voice cut through the room. But if we don't fight, if we give in now, we'll be nothing more than slaves to a species that has been waiting for centuries to dominate us. We'll lose everything that makes us who we are. The Rin representative's anger was palpable. The debate was like a war of words, each faction standing firm on their position, neither side willing to give an inch. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. Humanity had returned, and their return was not just a message. It was a declaration. Lyra stood up, her voice commanding attention despite the chaos around her. "We have no time to waste," she said, her tone sharp. "Every moment we waste debating, the humans grow stronger. Their fleets are already mobilizing, and their forces are spreading across the galaxy. This is no longer a question of what we want. It's a question of survival." The room fell silent. Lyra's words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of reality. The humans were not asking for permission. They were taking what they believed was rightfully theirs. The council could no longer afford to pretend they could stop them by diplomacy alone. "We have two choices," Lyra continued. "We either submit to humanity's demands, accept their rule, and live under their terms, or we resist, and we face the consequences. There's no middle ground." A murmur rippled through the chamber. It was the truth that they had been avoiding, but now they could no longer deny it. Resistance seemed impossible, yet submission felt like surrender, like abandoning everything they had worked for. The galaxy was at a crossroads. From the shadows of the council chamber, a voice spoke up, low, dangerous, and commanding. The head of the military council, General Keller, a large, muscular being from the Tenarian species, rose to his feet. "Resistance is the only option. We will fight. We must unite. If humanity believes they can take what is ours without consequence, they are gravely mistaken." The council looked at him, unsure. Keller was known for his strategic brilliance, but many of his tactics have been ruthless, bordering on madness. Still, his words resonated with some of the older, battle-hardened representatives, those who remembered the old wars. "Unite." The Harkner representative scoffed. "What makes you think any of us can unite against them? The humans are unlike any enemy we've ever faced. Their technology, their weapons, they have ships that can level entire fleets with a single blast." "The question isn't whether we can win," Keller retorted, his voice filled with cold determination. "It's whether we'll fight. If we let them take control without a single shot fired, we lose everything. Our sovereignty, our way of life, gone." Lyra could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Keller's words rang true, but she could also see the uncertainty in the faces of the council. Resistance would mean war, a war against a species who had been planning, building, and preparing for this moment for centuries. Could they really stand a chance? "The decision isn't as simple as you make it seem," Lyra said, looking directly at Keller. "Humanity isn't just a new enemy. They have lived through horrors we can't imagine. They'd fought and survived for generations, and they've learned how to be ruthless. If we resist, we may very well face annihilation." Keller glared at her, his eyes fierce with defiance. "Then we fight for our future, for the future of every race in this galaxy. We may not win, but we'll die free." The tension in the chamber grew thick. Some members of the council stood up, their faces hardening in agreement with Kaler's stance. Others looked down, unsure, fear clouding their judgment. The division was clear: resistance or submission. There was no middle ground. Lyra knew that something had to be done. The council was paralyzed by fear, and if they didn't act soon, humanity's fleets would be at their doorstep, ready to enforce their rule. If there was to be any hope for the galaxy, it would have to come from outside the council, from those who were willing to make the hard decisions. She turned to the group of high-ranking explorers who had returned from their contact with the humans. "We need to send a message," she said. "Not to the council, but to those who are still free, to the rest of the galaxy. We need to organize. We need to prepare. The time for debates is over." One of the explorers nodded. "We have no choice but to fight. We'll rally every ship we can, every race that still believes in freedom. We may not have much time, but we can unite the galaxy for one final stand." Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. This was it. The galaxy was about to be torn apart. Humanity had returned with a vengeance, and now the galaxy had to make its choice. Would they kneel before the humans, or would they stand and fight? Outside the council station, the stars seemed to grow darker, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The calm before the storm had ended. Now it was time to see who would survive the coming war. The galaxy was at war. The council had been torn apart by endless debates, but in the end, it was clear that humanity would not be ignored. The factions that had once been united now found themselves divided. Some joined humanity, others took a stand against them, and the rest hesitated, paralyzed by fear. But the one undeniable truth was that the galaxy's fragile peace had shattered. Lyra stood at the command center of a massive fleet, staring out at the stars. The once thriving space lanes, filled with the bustling traffic of trade ships and diplomatic vessels, were now eerily silent. The fleet she had helped assemble, the last remnants of the galaxy's independent forces, was ready. It was a hodgepodge of ships from all corners of the galaxy, gathered under a single banner, to resist humanity's overwhelming power. But as the fleet prepared to move, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that they were marching toward their doom. "We're ready, Captain," a voice said from behind her. It was Commander Jurek, a battle-hardened veteran from the Rin. His face was grim, but there was no fear in his eyes, just determination. Lyra nodded slowly. "Then let's make sure we're ready for whatever comes next." Far above the council station, the vast void of space shimmered with the light of distant stars. Yet, as Lyra scanned the blackness, something caught her eye. In the distance, just beyond the outer reaches of the galaxy, she saw it, a fleet. Humanity's fleet. The size was beyond anything she could have imagined. Dozens of warships, each one a massive fortress of steel and firepower, floated like shadows in the void. They weren't waiting for a response anymore. They were here. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The time for negotiations was long past. The humans had come to make their claim, by force, if necessary. As the first warning signals blared across the fleet, Lyra's hands gripped the command chair, her heart pounding. There would be no more time for second thoughts. She had fought for this moment, the chance to lead the galaxy's last stand. But now that it was here, the weight of the responsibility was crushing. "Commander," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves running through her, "inform the fleet. We'll engage them on our terms. Full power to the engines. We move out." The battle began with a single blinding flash. The first shots were fired, and for the first time in generations, the sound of warfare echoed through the galaxy. Humanity's ships, powerful and relentless, unleashed hell upon the resistance fleet, their energy beams cutting through the darkness. The independent forces fought back with everything they had: laser fire, missiles, and long-range artillery. But the human ships were like nothing they had ever faced. They were faster, stronger, and more coordinated than anything the galaxy's forces could muster. Lyra watched as one of the ships in her fleet was torn apart by a direct hit. It exploded in a ball of fire and debris, sending shockwaves across the surrounding ships. The resistance fleet was already being overwhelmed. "They're too strong," Jarek said, his voice tight with disbelief. "We can't keep up with them." "Don't give up," Lyra snapped. "We're not done yet. We still have one chance." As the battle raged, Lyra's mind raced. The resistance fleet was outclassed, but they still had one advantage: their knowledge of the galaxy's terrain. They could use it to their advantage, find weaknesses in humanity's strategy. "Set course for the asteroid belt," Lyra ordered. "We'll use it as cover. We can't fight them head-on, but we can hit them where it hurts. We've got one shot at this." Jarek didn't question her. "Hey, Captain. Course set for the belt." The fleet maneuvered, dodging blasts from humanity's ships as they cut through the asteroid field. The massive rocks provided cover, allowing the resistance ships to fire from unexpected angles. For a moment, it seemed like the tide might turn. But then the human ships adapted quickly. They moved like a single entity, their tactics flawless. The resistance fleet's advantage was slipping away. Lyra's heart sank as she saw several ships from her fleet being torn apart by concentrated fire. The humans were relentless. "Captain, the enemy is sending a communication," the communications officer said, his voice tense. Lyra hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Put it through." A face appeared on the screen. A human officer, his expression cold and emotionless. "You have two choices," the officer said in a voice devoid of pity. "You either surrender or you will all be destroyed. This is your last warning." Lyra's fists clenched. She could feel the weight of the galaxy's future pressing down on her. The humans had given them their ultimatum: surrender or die. But then a voice rang out from the back of the command room. It was General Keller, its face hard and defiant. "We will never surrender. We will die fighting." Lyra turned to face him, her eyes burning with the same determination. "We fight," she said firmly. "We fight for the freedom of every race in this galaxy. We fight for our future." Keller nodded. "To the last ship." With a final cry of defiance, Lyra gave the order. "All ships engage. Full power to all weapons. We are not backing down." The battle reached a fever pitch. Explosions lit up the dark void of space, and the once quiet stars seemed to blaze with the fury of the conflict. The resistance fleet fought with everything they had, but humanity's ships were unrelenting. The humans were no longer the myth they once were. They were a force, one that would stop at nothing to claim their place in the galaxy. As the last remaining ships of the resistance made their final stand, Lyra could only watch as their forces were systematically wiped out. The humans were too powerful. The galaxy had underestimated them, and now it was paying the price. But as the final ship in the resistance fleet was destroyed, Lyra stood tall, her heart heavy, but her resolve unbroken. She had fought for what she believed in, and though the battle was lost, the story of humanity's return, the story of their fight, would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. And though humanity's fleet had conquered the stars, the resistance had sparked a fire that would not be easily extinguished. The galaxy was forever changed, and the legacy of those who fought for freedom would live on in every corner of the universe.